Okay, so I think we are now live. This is the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board of Directors special meeting. We moved it from our regular date and time for some operational purposes. This meeting is being conducted pursuant to the governor's executive order that allows for some amendments to the Brown Act, namely that we can run these meetings via remote situation. We use the Zoom platform. Members of the public are invited to participate. They can provide feedback. When requested, they can raise their virtual hands to indicate their desire to speak. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. And I'm not sure there's anything else I need to announce with that. The clerk will correct me if I did. So we officially call the meeting to order, and if we could get a roll call vote, please.
Yes.
Just roll call, please.
Yes, thank you. Chair Miller?
Here.
Vice Chair Smith?
Here.
Sinks?
Yes.
Fliger?
Here.
Tyson?
Here.
Rennie?
Here.
Montano?
Here.
Elahi?
Present.
Yulo?
Here.
Ellenberg?
Here.
Thank you. I'll note that Director Tovar, Abe Koga, and Gibbons is currently, oh, excuse me, I see Director Gibbons. Director Gibbons.
I'm here.
Great, thank you so much. So we're just missing Tovar and Abe Koga.
So we do have a quorum.
We do have a quorum.
All right, next up is public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. Any member of the public may address this body on matters not on the agenda. The law generally prohibits us from taking action or discussing those items, though we may ask questions or refer something to staff. If there's any member of the public that wishes to comment at this point, please indicate your desire to do so by raising your virtual hand, or if you've called in on the phone, you can do that by pressing *9. And I am seeing no members of the public that wish to comment at this point. So we're going to move forward. Next up is our consent calendar. Consent calendar contains items of routine business that can be acted on in one motion. Anybody can discuss an item or request an item be pulled. Is there anybody who wants to pull an item or anybody wants to make a motion?
I'll move the minutes.
I'll move the consent calendar. Do you want to move the?
I'll move the consent calendar. Yes, I'll move the whole thing. Thank you.
Then I'll second it.
Well, for a second there, I thought we were going to do them one at a time. Thank you. Let me check with the public. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to any of the 9 items which are on our consent calendar today? If you wish to do so, please indicate by raising your virtual hand, or if you're on the phone, you can do that by pressing *9. Seeing none, I will come back to the board. Does anybody have any comments they want to make? Seeing none, we will go to the clerk for a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Chair Miller?
Aye.
Vice Chair Smith?
Yes.
Gibbons?
Yes.
Sinks?
Yes.
Fliger?
Yes.
Tyson?
Yes.
Rennie?
Yes.
Montano?
Yes.
Elahi?
Yes.
Yulo?
Yes.
Ellenberg?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries with Tovar and Abe Koga absent.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. All right. Next up is our regular calendar. First item, as is our tradition, is always our CEO's report. That's item 2.
Thank you, Chair Miller, members of the board. I have a few items I would like to bring up as part of the CEO report. First, I'd like to introduce our new CFO, who's replacing Don Eckert, who left in July. We're very happy to introduce Amrit Singh, who will be the CFO and Director of Administrative Services. Amrit has an illustrious background. He is quite an expert in energy risk management at a very deep level, and he's worked for PG&E for many years and then consulted also. So let me hand it over to him so he can introduce himself to you. Amrit? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to meet you. I'm excited to be here at SVCE and carry on the important work of decarbonization. I look forward to working with everyone and looking forward to engaging with all of you coming forward. Little bit about my background. As Grish mentioned, I come from, a lot of my experiences start from PG&E. I worked in various capacities at PG&E, started out as a planner, worked on the unregulated and regulated side of the business, worked in some startup energy initiatives. A lot of my focus has been in the area of commodity portfolio management and risk management. I became a consultant after some startup initiative. I became a consultant to PG&E during the California energy crisis when I helped them get back into the procurement business. And I did that for a few years, and it was quite an undertaking. And then they had asked me to join and rejoin the company and set up their risk management and commodity risk management practice, which I did for a number of years. And then also worked in their revenue requirements and rates organization. And after PG&E, I worked on another startup initiative where we were trying to bring some digital transformation initiatives to the utility industry, which I think is very much well needed, where we were trying to do risk-based decision making. And as Grish mentioned, I've also done strategic management consulting to IOUs, utilities, as well as some CCAs. And that brings me here to SVCE, and look forward to carrying on the important work of the organization. A little bit about personal front. I'm married with 2 kids. They happen to be both in college now. Although they've never left home, my wife and I were looking forward to being empty nesters for a little while. We thought we'd take our 25th wedding anniversary because there'll be no kids at home, but unfortunately they never left home. So we'll have to take a rain check on that. Other than that, I enjoy a lot of variety of activities. I love to be physically active. I'm a member of the CrossFit community here in the East Bay. And as I was telling the team earlier, I think I've broken or damaged just about every joint in my body through that process, but I love it. Anyways, excited to be here and look forward to working with everyone.
Yeah, welcome on behalf of the board. I'm sure others will say it as well, but welcome to our organization. You know, we're an energy company, but in a weird way, our mission from our perspective is to change the world. And so, right, providing clean energy is just the start. It's the base, and we go from there. And we expect everybody on the staff to be amazingly creative and clever, except for finance. We need that to be 100% by the books and rock solid, because that's the platform upon which we will do everything that we feel we want to do in the world. So we're grateful that you've joined us, and we hope that you love what we're doing as much as we do.
Thank you very much.
And I got to just throw out as a challenge, you know, I would really love to get a credit rating that started with an A.
We'll take that as a challenge.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for joining us. Anybody else have any comments?
Yeah. I would also like to welcome you, Amrit. We admire your past efforts on behalf of what was a monopoly, and now we are delighted that you have seen the light, so to speak. If
Yes.
you're good at CrossFit and these other things, we wanted to introduce you to our new power generation program. It's called a treadmill. We're expecting that you're part of our DER solution.
Yes, absolutely.
We try to improve grid resilience.
A lot of megawatts.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you for choosing to join.
Amrit, welcome. And to make you feel homesick, I put a background that may remind you of Fiji.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Absolutely.
And I just had a point of clarification from Morgan Hill, the host of the CrossFit Games recently. I'm not sure if you understood that when Howard said he wanted a credit rating started with an A, he's only going to be on the board for a couple more months. So you definitely have your work cut out for you.
Okay. Well, thankfully the team is well prepared for that and already marching well forward ahead with that. So we've got our meeting coming up with S&P. So I think we're well prepared.
Well, the organization is in great shape, and some of these are just standing jokes with some of the individuals. And so for 3 years, I've been saying credit rating with an A. And so it's exciting times for us.
Yes, that's an important milestone. We need that for managing our collateral obligations and maintaining liquidity.
Absolutely. Anything else?
Yes.
Okay, let me go back to Girish for the rest of our CEO report. I didn't mean to derail us.
No, this is perfect. This is what we wanted to have. So thank you very much for that. And thank you, Amrit. I wanted to inform all of you that I'll be speaking at the November 18th Santa Clara City Managers Group. I'll be talking to them about the resiliency program that you authorized. You authorized $5 million of the $10 million CRCR grant program for resiliency. So Amy and Zoe and Don have been putting this together. So I'm going to be briefing them on what each of the cities can take advantage of in terms of the planning grant that we are offering them. So that's just FYI for you that I'll be meeting with your city managers on November 18th. I would now like to move to having just a short update that Pam is going to provide on the eHub, and a switch is on building decarbonization outreach. So Pam?
Hello, directors. Good afternoon. Pamela Leonard here, your communications manager. Andrea is going to pull up a couple of slides that we just wanted to highlight that are in the Decarb and Grid Innovation Programs update. And the first is to let you know that we have begun promoting eHub. So we've sent out emails to all of our customers with an email on file. This is part of our digital pivot. That is part of our strategic plan this year. And we're also doing outreach through your member agency communication channels, have been sharing these resources to the community about electric vehicles, electric appliances, and solar and battery storage. We'll also be promoting eHub in the power content label going out in a few weeks. But we wanted to take this time to let you know that we're leveraging the holiday shopping trends that are coming up to offer discounts on products through the Appliances Assistant tool. And this is to drive traffic and engagement with the site. This is part of the industry best practices that our partners at NRV have been guiding us through. And these discounts will be available on portable induction cooktops, which is very mission aligned and a suggestion by one of our community advocates that we really appreciated, as well as LED light bulbs and smart power strips. So you may have seen already, or should soon be seeing, an email introducing customers to the Appliances Assistant and teasing some of these discounts that are coming up. And next month, we're going to do a deeper dive as a discussion item to give some more details about what our digital engagement strategies are going to be utilizing eHub, formerly known as the Customer Resource Center. So that's our little update on the eHub. And next slide. Also wanted to let you know that you will start to see ads about the switch is on. So this is an engagement we've been part of as a funding partner with the Building Decarbonization Coalition to create a consumer awareness campaign about building electrification. So a pretty difficult topic. Have to think about ways that are very creative and exciting to showcase mini splits and heat pump water heaters and the like. A little more challenging on the creative front instead of like an EV commercial, for example. But you will start to see these ads through digital distribution, social media ads, and also just streaming live on TV. We are funding the deployment of the ads locally in our service territory. And the partnership includes other municipal utilities that we know well, and investor-owned utilities across the state with other CCAs. So it's a pretty broad coalition, and this is just the first phase of what will become a multi-year campaign. This is just the beginning. We'll learn from this and iterate. And BDC, or Building Decarb Coalition, actually just secured from some state funding to continue this effort because they realize it's a very important aspect for consumer awareness and education. And so the next page, or next slide, is just a preview of what some of these ads look like. So taking this headline approach to try to catch people's attention, playing to some of our current events, like working from home just got more comfortable. So we're very excited that we are actually the first. So part of our, being on the leading edge as SVCE, we're actually the first among the partners who are ready to deploy these ads, since we have other resources in place with our eHub. So very excited to share this update and excited to also hear what your thoughts are as you start to see some of these. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. So that was an info update. You'll be seeing a lot more about that, and Don and Pam will be presenting more on that at the December board meeting. I wanted to recognize our two latest members, most recent members who have approved REACH codes. We didn't really mention that at the last board meeting, but we do have City of Los Altos, and thank you very much, Nisa, and the City of Sunnyvale. Thank you, Nancy, for being, now we have 11 of our 13 members who have adopted REACH codes. And I have to say, I think of any community in the state, we probably have the highest percentage of cities that have adopted REACH codes. So thank you very much for your efforts, individual efforts at your cities to make this happen, because I know it was not easy. I'm now going to hand it over to Melissa, Melissa Charles, our Director of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs, to give you a short update on the state of that area.
So in terms of regulatory update, there is a fair amount going on. In terms of PCIA, we are in the process of continuing to negotiate and work on PCIA. The CPUC is in the middle of their air forecast. I apologize. In the middle of their air forecast, and PG&E filed their application earlier this year, proposing a 10% increase to the PCIA. And so we're working with Cal CCA and our other CCA partners in terms of negotiating that down and working within the regulatory process. And so where we are now is it's November. We're expecting a decision from the CPC. It could be as early as December. It could be a little bit later in terms of establishing the 2021 PCIA. So that's basically where we are in terms of PCIA. Direct access, as I mentioned in an earlier meeting, there was the CPC had issued a direct access proposal recommending phased-in direct access that would happen in 2026. Since then, we, through Cal CCA, had submitted comments along with the other the other stakeholders, and we are waiting for a decision there. We're expecting a decision early next year, and then final recommendations will go to the legislature in March. I'm going to stop there. There's a lot going on, but I would say these are the two things that are key priorities for us, and we are actively engaged along with our partners on these.
Melissa,
thank you.
Can I ask one really quick question? Because all of our citizens have seen the PUC thing from PG&E, and some of them have claimed, because it's so confusing, they've claimed if you're a Silicon Valley Clean Energy customer, your rates are going up by 10% or something crazy. And there's even discussions of this is why you should leave Silicon Valley Clean Energy.
I know.
I've responded to some of the ones I've seen on Nextdoor. Is there an official complaint? Because this wasn't ethical on PG&E's part. And look, Rod Sinks is shocked that they acted unethically. I can just see the look on his face. But this is not right.
I understand. And we saw it and we're concerned about it. And we have been talking with Cal CCA in terms of what we can do in terms of, misleading communications. There'll be more to come, but we do need to sort of circle up internally and figure out what our plan is, because we totally agree, especially because none of this is has been decided yet. And I know the language in the mailer basically did talk about, TCIA is pending, but it is misleading. And so, yeah, we're circling up. We'll talk with internally on that. But, the bottom line is that we have to wait for the CPUC to rule on this. And we are working with our external coalition to mitigate those PCIA prices. So yes, more to come there. But thank you, and totally share your concern.
Yeah, I get the regulatory aspect. We got a PR aspect too. So there's two sides. Liz, you have a comment?
Absolutely.
I really do want to reinforce, and this is my common line theme throughout all our conversations. You have to remember, we're elected officials. We voted to establish this and make this decision on behalf of our community without going out to a community vote. I mean, it is a big deal for us as electeds, your board members, to be able to respond clearly about what this correspondence is saying incorrectly. So I'm not meaning to say we need to light a fire under this. I just really want to emphasize that for the success of your board members and the program, this is a big deal.
If I may add something, we have informed our customer service center and provided them talking points on this issue. So if any customer calls, they will get the straight story from our customer center. So we've followed up with that, and we will be working with other CCAs to communicate with the PUC. So we'll take that as something to follow up on and make a note of it and get back to you.
Javid's hands up. Javid, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I was just curious. I think what is our target on the PCIA? I mean, what is PG&E trying to establish as the PCIA number, and do we, the CCAs, have a different number for what should be the right PCIA?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but yes and yes. The short answer is yes and yes. And so we are working on that. Part of it is part of the deliberative process, and since this is a public meeting, it's difficult to share here, but I'm happy to follow up with you afterwards in terms of specifics.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you. Okay, Garish. Oh, wait a minute. Susan put up her hand. I'm falling behind. Susan, please go ahead.
Thanks, Howard. And I appreciate the phone number and ability for people to get the straight story, but I want to emphasize Liz's comments as being really critical. And if there are opportunities for us to proactively push out information, whether it's through our social media or email lists or speaking opportunities, it's really helpful to all of us as electeds to be able to get ahead of areas of potential confusion or conflict and have the talking points or the graphics or whatever you can create for us to put out. And I would appreciate always being able to do that and being able to be an advocate.
I think that's an excellent point, but I don't know if we are internally concerned with whether what PG&E is saying is correct or not, and whether their PCI numbers will end up forcing us to raise prices or not.
But
So,
they sent it to all of our customers, implying our rates would go up and theirs wouldn't.
right,
And that puts us under a lot of pressure from the naysayers.
yeah. So my concern is we better make sure that they're wrong. I mean, what our PCIA numbers are going to come up with, or whether we need to do something else to cut our expenses down to be able to continue, serving at a lower rate. So if you send out something, let's make sure we're sending out the correct information.
Howard, you just kind of offhanded said something about the customers receiving notice. And I think I am alone on this board, but I am not an SVCE customer. I live in the city of San Jose. So I don't get any of the customer outreach pieces.
This was the letter from PG&E. So you would have gotten it too.
Oh, from PG&E. I thought you were talking about something that originated with SVCE.
No, it originated from PG&E.
I see what Nancy's waving. Thank you.
About their rate proceedings, and they changed the way they described this. And it just sounds like we're all going to get big rate increases, right, and their customers will not.
But to Susan's point, Chair, our messaging? Who are we directing our messaging to clarify and correct the record? Are we only targeting our SVCE customers?
Yes, at this point, we're not doing anything. We're not going to be sending a mailer out to all our customers at this point. That's not part of our plan. So frankly, I don't know how many customers actually read the fine print on this. So we do want to be prepared to respond. I think the two things that we've done so far is getting the call center ready to answer some questions. And secondly, reaching out to the CPUC. We have not reached out to the CPUC directly. Another CCA has made that connection, but we are in touch with them. So I think that would be the follow-up action, Nisa, I think the more effective action actually is to work through the CPUC to make sure that the way in which they characterize the PCIA does not fall afoul of code of conduct rules that are applicable to PG&E.
Yeah, very few people read this insert. And in my world, you know, the insert, it was like, yeah, these idiots. But then it showed up on Nextdoor. And that was where I got upset. And it was on my wife's Nextdoor feed. So she said, I have called the chairman of Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and he promises me that the rates are lower. Rod, you had a comment on this item?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the idea that Liz and Susan raised. I mean, you know, by the time you're taking a phone call, you're already on the defensive, right? I would like to privately understand what our strategy is, but I do think, you know, if we go to the PUC in a timely way, this tactic could backfire, right? It may cause commissioners to be maybe more thoughtful than they have in the past about just coming down with PCIs that are, frankly, they've never been transparent to us, right? It's all done in the black box. It's hard to decipher the black box. And remind them again that IOUs hold this incumbent power and they need to be fair to us. And with a communication like this, they have prejudiced our customers. And I, for one, would like to see an offensive communication strategy and, you know, by whatever means, make board members privy to it. So thank you.
I get the sensitivity, right? We're, as elected officials, we're sensitive to it. And I just, we just don't want to Heisenberg ourselves where our actions are changing the system itself and making tons more people aware of something that they're otherwise perfectly content with. So
no, I get that too, but I think, yeah, that may also speak to strategy to go to the PUC, right?
Excellent.
Okay, we'll follow up on this topic.
Any other comments on this one? Okay, then we're gonna move on, Grish.
Yeah, so my last item and announcement, I wanted to announce that Hillary Staver informed me that she is going to be leaving SVCE at the end of next week. So I wanted to acknowledge the good work that she's done for us over the last 4 years. She was part of the startup of SVCE, brought us through those initial RA difficulties when we had to get ourselves set up. She's one of the early employees. And so she's seen a lot, participated in a lot, both at SVCE and at Cal CCA. Just wanted to wish her well and also inform all of you about her departure. So that's the last item. Hillary is on the call also. So just in case Hillary wants to say something or you want to communicate with Hillary, I just wanted to give that opportunity.
Yeah, Hillary may want to say something. Let me make a comment because I'm sure the whole board is going to say this. You know, Hillary joined us in the crazy days when we were first starting, and it was pre-Wild Wild West. It was too new to even know it was a Wild Wild West, and we've lived through so much stuff together, and we've moved from clawing our way into existence to now feeling like we're the king of the hill, but boy, the assaults are on us. And so I am proud that Hillary has been with us for these 4 years, and it was a pleasure and an honor to have worked shoulder to shoulder with Hillary. Many of you made trips to Sacramento and worked on other legislative things directly with Hillary. And your voice and your exceptionally thorough reports will be missed, and pleasant memories for some of us. Now, I know many people want to speak. Let me see if Hillary, you want to let us speak first and then we'll put you on, or you want to go the other way?
Well, actually, you guys go ahead. I'll go after you. How about
Sure.
that?
So I'm going to go sort of reverse order here. Well, no, I'm down to 2 people who've been here since the beginning. So Rod and then Liz, I think both of you have known Hillary from the beginning.
Oh, thank you, Howard. Hillary, thank you for your service. You know, I think Howard characterized it well. We've spent a lot of time driving to Mark Stone's office in Santa Cruz and over to the East Bay to some assembly members that didn't exactly get what we were about and wanted to talk about other things. And there were those trips to Sacramento, and there was that memorable meeting at the PUC. So thank you for all of the advocacy you've helped support. I think it's tough when you're beginning something, right? We were like a startup, one of the first CCAs, and you know, you don't have a lot of political clout in the beginning, and the PUC sort of looks at you and says, "Who the hell are you?" and tries to brush you aside and forget about you, and then you start to develop some strength, and even then it's challenging because now you are challenging the order, and you've helped organize us and prepare us and make our voices heard, if not always honored in Sacramento or San Francisco, but we were always there to try. So thank you so much, and best of wishes for your next gig.
And I'll just follow on with compliments as well as what Howard and Rod have just said, that it has been an experience for me, and Hillary was there all along to give me pointers and information, so I didn't feel like I was going to fall down a well of confusion. So I thank you for always being there for us, helping all the board members, and getting our TCA off to the really great start that we are. So thank you for all of that, and enjoy your next adventure.
And Nancy?
Yeah, thank you. I was, I guess, round 2 of the board members, and I remember, I believe you gave a overview that was pretty scary and detailed, and I still have notes, and I go back to it and from time to time and realize that you really did a good job of explaining it. It's very complicated, and I'm glad that the board asked for there to be more training, but I always found you to be very patient, and you could tell when we didn't get something and you repeated it very patiently. And so I really learned a lot from you, and wish you very well in your next endeavors. And, you know, I'll always remember the trip that we had to Sacramento, the first one, and that was exciting times running around, meeting with this. I was amazed at how many people we were able to meet with, and we were very well prepared, and I think our talking points were really solid. So really appreciate all your work, and best of luck. Thanks.
Okay, Hillary?
Well, thank you, all of you. Thank you for the very kind words. Mostly, I just want to say thank you. It's been an amazing 4 years, and this team is one of the most passionate and dedicated and just positive teams that I've ever worked with. Both my colleagues on the staff and you on the board. It's kind of hard to believe sometimes how far we've come in 4 years, just how much has changed. And it's been incredibly rewarding to watch SVCE grow and evolve and go from getting our feet under us, which I wasn't even here for the real groundwork on that, but to go from that to expanding into just all kinds of programs and projects, and all of those come with new policy issues for my team. So that's been really exciting. So thank you very much to all of my colleagues on the staff and all of you on the board. Definitely, it's an unusual year. Unfortunately, we can't do all of our usual meetings and Sacramento gatherings, but we've done a lot of good work. And especially coming off the last update, one thing that I did just want to point out, I realized that in our policy discussions, we often spend a lot of time focusing on the things that are threats, or when things haven't gone well, sort of how do we respond. But there's the other side to that conversation that maybe comes up less frequently, is at the CPUC and in the legislature, the CCAs have absolutely changed the conversation in a positive direction. I think, if any of you looked into the root cause analysis on the blackouts that came out recently, we've got some tough decarbonization goals in the state, and it's going to require evolution on how we look at reliability, on how we sort of integrate our planning between different regulatory agencies. And those kind of questions the CCAs have been looking at for years now. We are absolutely pushing the conversation forward, and sometimes, it's a slow process, and sometimes it can feel like one step forward and 2 steps back, or vice versa. But make no mistake, in the 4 years I've been here, the CCAs have been pushing decarbonization forward in the state much faster, working on the linkages between where decarbonization is happening at the state versus the local level, kind of weaving those together. So it's been incredibly rewarding, not only to see SVCE grow and thrive as an organization, but to see in the policy world the positive impact that's having on the energy space as a whole. So thank you very much for the opportunity to work with all of you. And I hope I can carry all of the best things from SVCE forward to where I go next.
Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you, Hillary. And on behalf of all of the current board members and the past board members and alternates that you've worked with over the years, let me say thank you for being part of our attempts to change the world. And we wish you the best of luck moving forward.
Thank you.
Chair Miller, that's the end of my CEO report. Thank you.
Girish, I have one thing, and I'm going to bring it up at the end, but I figured it might be worth mentioning in the CEO report because you might already know an answer. Hillary's not the only one that will be leaving us soon. I did not seek a 4th term. 3 was already too many, and so I will be officially out of office in December. And if the pundits are right, Nancy may be out of office soon also, and I do not know the exact date. And I wonder if we have a legal framework to conduct a meeting in January if you don't have a chair and a vice chair.
So Chair Miller, thank you actually for anticipating this and informing us about it. So we've talked to General Counsel Greg Stepanisic, and we'll be bringing this to the executive committee shortly, and we'll bring something for action up at the board meeting in December. We'll most likely suggest something like electing an interim chair so we can start the meeting with the chair and then have elections. Andrea will be sending out the email, what I call the standard email, to all the board members, asking those who have an interest in being the chair or vice chair to indicate their interest prior to the January meeting, so we can have that set up. So to the entire board, we will be bringing this to the exec committee and then to the board meeting on December 9th to make sure that this transition goes smoothly.
Yeah, I'm all for smooth transitions. Well, once my court case in Michigan and Pennsylvania are resolved, but Anyway, just, I just, it's better to know what our plan is before we get to the meeting. So we'll look good when we're there because we know exactly what's going on. Nisa, you had a comment?
No, so is this your last meeting, Chair, and Vice Chair Smith's last meeting?
No, I think that we're both available for the December meeting. I got to see,
Okay, good.
Nancy's
Okay.
nodding.
Okay,
It's just, it might take a couple of, a little discussion to kind of get it organized. And I don't want it to become a free-for-all in January. Because up until that point, every meeting has been exceptionally run, right? I got all these past chairs with me. Anyway, just trying to head off a problem at the pass. Okay, that wasn't officially on the agenda, but thank you, Grish, for having that a plan, and we look forward to sorting that out. I think we should just move on unless there's some final thoughts. Oops, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I need to ask the public, is there a member of the public who wishes to make comment on the CEO report? If you wish to do so, please do so by raising your virtual hand. And I think staff will allow you your 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. So Bruce Carney.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to bid a fond farewell to Hillary. Hillary, you are one of the most awesome communicators I've ever had the pleasure to listen to and read the writings of. You cover a very difficult and challenging territory with all of the regulations, which can easily baffle those of us who are not deeply into the business of electricity generation and supply. But I've always felt, after listening to your updates to the board, that at least for a few minutes, I actually knew what was going on. Sometimes it didn't stick, but you did your best. And wherever you land next, I'm sure you will add tremendous value to that organization. But I would like to extend an invitation to you and also to the directors who will be moving off of the board to join the advocacy community. Carbon-Free Silicon Valley would love to have your continued participation in our efforts to help frame the conversation and steer SVCE in the right direction. So please do consider that as a way to stay engaged later, in the year and months ahead. But again, thank you so much for everything you've done, Hillary, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Bruce. We loved you so much. We allocated you 3 hours of speaking time. We have one more speaker, James.
Yes, this is James Chair of Carbon-Free Valley and resident of Slidell. And Bruce said all of what I was going to say. So,
James, your connection seems really garbled.
Okay.
Sometimes turning off your video helps, but it may already be off. You want to try again?
Yeah. How about this?
That's much better.
Okay. Yeah, it's my Bluetooth problem. So I just wanted to say I'm James Tilley, resident of Sunnyvale and chair of Carbon-Free Silicon Valley. I was worried about Bruce taking 3 hours there. But Bruce already said everything that I was going to say. I would also say that I really appreciate Hillary's efforts. I know how hard it is to deal with regulatory affairs. I used to do that for residential energy efficiency programs at PG&E, and it's a really tough position. So really appreciate all the work, and thanks again.
Thank you, Bruce. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to make comment on this? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. Any final thoughts from the board? Seeing none.
Yeah, no, I do have one, Howard.
Please, go
I
ahead.
can't let you talk about, lawsuits elsewhere without mentioning that this decision about who's going to lead the agency will be left to the Electrical College. Sorry.
Well, we look forward to the electrons charging us up for the next year. And with that, we got to get off of this. Garish, please, can we start number 3?
Yes, please. Forthwith. Could you, Andrea, could you please have the PowerPoint displayed? And once I stop laughing, I can start the presentation. Most of this presentation will be given to you by Amy Bailey, but I want to start with a few slides. Next slide, please. So this is what the proposal is. We are asking that the board adopt the joint action plan for building decarbonization and approve a $6 million budget over 3 years for implementation, $2 million a year. We'll come back to the staff proposal at the end of the presentation. Next slide. And here's what we're going to go over. Next slide. And you can switch 2 slides, go to the next one. Yeah. So board, you've seen this slide quite a bit in other presentations, including our strategic plan. So I want to frame this. When you think of our overall approach to decarbonization, and most recently when we talked about the strategic plan, you see that, you know, our emissions in the last 20 years kind of come down gradually, but we need to do a lot more. And basically in the next 20 years, our reduction in emissions really need to be much steeper. So when we think about that, that's what we have our decarbonization programs and strategy roadmap, which you approved in December 2018. We approach decarbonization, this Venn diagram kind of is a good schematic to show we do electricity. On the right-hand side is mobility or transportation, and then the bottom left is buildings or the built environment. Each one of these sectors has emissions, and we need to have a different sector-specific plan to deal with that. Next slide. So for each of these sectors, the board has taken action. For example, on power supply, you've adopted the integrated resource plan, which actually has a planning horizon of 10 years out, and we update this plan every 2 years. That's the law, and you are quite involved in doing that, and it's a very complex process of modeling, etc. But you've approved that. In 2019, you approved a sector-specific plan for transportation or mobility, and that's the EV Infrastructure Joint Action Plan. And the reason we call it joint is it is a joint effort of all our agencies. So all 13 of you are represented in developing this plan. And so we adopted it in 2019, and we had 6 different program initiatives under that we are in the process of implementing. Now we come to today, where we have a similar plan we are offering up for your review and approval today, which has to do with buildings. And again, here the word joint has to do with all agencies have been included in developing this plan. So I just wanted to frame that this is the 3rd leg of, say, a tripod, where essentially we have the long-term plans for the power supply sector and the mobility sector already adopted, and now we're working on this 3rd sector. That's my overall framing of where this plan fits in with our other efforts. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Amy to take us right through this presentation to recommendation. Amy?
Great. Thank you, Girish. And good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and Directors. Before continuing in the presentation, I did want to mention just briefly, I have some backup here, specifically Janica McFeely from Integral Group, the consultant group that supported this effort. Janica is a panelist here, and I may ask her to weigh in during the Q&A, in case you're wondering who Janica is. Next slide, please. And so I think Girish already provided some great framing comments. Just very briefly to provide a quick summary of how we got here. The development of this plan was identified as a board priority at the February 2020 meeting. And the plan was intended to build on the building decarb plan, the decarb roadmap, as well as a tremendous progress that's been made in 2019 and 2020 through the REACH code effort. The board then approved the contract with Integral Group the following month. And from April through June, staff and integral group have been carrying out a lot of background research and stakeholder engagement to inform the development of a draft. That draft was circulated for stakeholder input, which was integrated in the July-August timeframe. And that input informed the final draft. We did have a draft that was shared with the executive committee at their September 25th meeting, and there were a few additional updates after that meeting as well. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a visual representation of the timeline that is shown here. All of this is to say that what we're bringing you here today has a lot of fingerprints on it, and it's been very heavily vetted. Next slide. All right, so moving on to the next section. All right, the written plan is attached to this item in the board packet. I have some slides here in this section to summarize it. So I think you've all seen this chart before. SVCE has made tremendous progress in reducing community emissions by offering a carbon-free electricity supply. The two largest remaining sources of emissions, which are shown in light blue and orange in the stacked bar chart, are from transportation and natural gas. And to address climate change, we have to address both sources of these emissions. Next slide, please. So to inform the plan, we carried out a buildings baseline study that characterized energy and emissions from buildings in our community. And this is a so-called Sankey diagram of emissions by fuel source, sector, and end use for our service territory. All of the numbers that are listed here are in metric tons of CO2 equivalent. I realize that this is kind of a complex chart. I'm just going to point out three different parts to focus on. First, on the very left, this shows emissions from buildings by fuel source, either gas or electricity. So what you'll notice is most emissions are coming from gas, as represented by the size of that bar. Then if you look at the second set of vertical bars, based on the building stock in our communities, roughly half of emissions are coming from the residential sector and roughly half are coming from the commercial sector. And we do have to address both to achieve our climate goals. Then if you look at the very right-hand set of vertical bars, this is emissions by end use. So you'll see here that most of the emissions are due to space and water heating end uses. That is to say, natural gas appliances. Next slide. Therefore, to address emissions, we have to address natural gas usage in buildings, and that does mean electrification, the second step here of our overarching approach. Next slide. And as you all already know, we aren't talking about coil stoves or resistance furnaces, but very modern, efficient appliances such as heat pump appliances and induction stoves. Next slide. 1 in 4 homes in the US is already all electric. All electric buildings are industry standard in many other regions of the US and internationally. But in California, including in our service territory, we have primarily dual fuel buildings. That is to say, buildings with both electricity and gas service. And there are significant barriers from getting to where we are today to getting to a decarbonized building stock. And the 5 barriers shown here are derived from the Building Decarb Coalition's Building Decarbonization Roadmap. And these barriers were validated through our own stakeholder engagement processes, specifically very low awareness and interest, low perceived contractor and builder value, misaligned policy, low availability, and low perceived customer value. Next slide, please. Addressing these barriers to achieve market transformation will require a suite of interventions, some of which SVCE and member agencies are well positioned to drive. Others, on the other hand, may be better led by other agencies and other stakeholders. And so these 4 areas are kind of the types of actions, categories of actions that we are kind of contemplating. Under retail products and services, the specific types of interventions could be, for instance, rate design to facilitate electrification, financing and incentives, building to grid integration. Under education and outreach, some examples of interventions are regional coordination, public awareness campaigns, such as the Switches On campaign that Pam provided an update on at the beginning of the meeting. Under public policy, of course, REACH codes, as well as more broadly ordinances that can address emissions in existing buildings. And under market transformation, the specific types of interventions can relate to workforce development or innovation. Next slide. So in the development of this plan to really help us filter and evaluate potential strategies for consideration, we use the strategic framework that was adopted by the board in the Decarb roadmap that's shown here. And so the top row, those are the kind of categories of activities that I just shared. The second row are specifically the prioritization criteria that were used for the development of the program's roadmap. We use those again here: customer and community value, emissions impact, scalability and transferability, equity and service, and core role for SVCE. And then the bottom row, and this applies more broadly than just programs, I think everything that SVCE does, we focus on innovation, we focus on data, and we focus on partnerships. Next slide. So the primary activities that are proposed in this plan, this action plan, are areas where SVCE and member agencies, they're within our spheres of control. But there are also supportive actions that are listed that fall more within the category of our sphere of influence, shown at the bottom. For instance, state and regional policy and appliance standards. Next slide. And so that's the backdrop. The following few slides focus on the specific actions, so-called cornerstone actions that we're proposing. And there are three sections of the plan. The first section is new construction, specifically stopping the expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure and the associated stranded assets that are going to be very complex and expensive to retrofit later on down the line. The second area is existing buildings, taking our existing building stock and accelerating electrification of those buildings. And then the third category is market development, really helping to cultivate a regional ecosystem for advancing building decarb goals. Next slide, please. So under these three categories, there are 6 cornerstone actions or programs that we're proposing through this plan listed here, and we'll go through them by section. Next slide, please. Under new construction, the cornerstone action is a continuation of the REACH code effort, in this case to address gaps in application, explore specific technologies such as storage, as well as evaluate and address the 2022 code cycle, which is coming up. Next slide. Under existing buildings, this is where the majority of the proposed new actions are. There are 4 total. First, specifically building on statewide results from AB 3232, carry out a feasibility assessment for a natural gas phase out in 2045. And this would be focusing specifically on local conditions and local opportunities and barriers. Second, modeled very much after the REACH code effort, support member agencies in the collective development, adoption, and implementation of local policies to decarbonize existing buildings. Next slide, please. Third, expand the Future Fit heat pump water heater program to be the Future Fit homes and buildings program. So expand it to all use cases of homes and buildings, not just water heating. And specifically position ourselves as a central point of contact to help our customers navigate some of the many incentive programs that are already out there. And using SVCE's limited resources to really, in a very targeted way, fill gaps and address participation barriers. Then fourth under this category is accessible financing to really help support an equitable transition to a decarbonized community. Next slide. And this is the 6th and final proposed cornerstone action under market development, specifically initiate a regional forum for coordination across many stakeholder groups to advance building decarb goals. Next slide. In addition to those cornerstone actions, there are a variety of existing and supportive actions already approved by the board, reflected here, which we're carrying out in parallel. And so I did want to reflect these. The cornerstone actions are incremental to a variety of efforts that are already ongoing. Next slide. All right, next slide, please. Okay, to implement this plan, we're requesting a budget allocation of $2 million per year for a 3-year period, and then to carry out a phased deployment of programs, a tentative timeline for which is shown here in this table. Next slide. So to put the budget allocation request in perspective, this is a summary chart showing all board allocations of programs budget by program area. And so on the y-axis is money going from 0 to 6 million. The board has approved in the past 2% of operating revenues to be devoted to programs. And so it's a function of our operating revenue. The rough range is 5 to 6 million per year focused on programs. And so that's that yellow bar at the top. And then here, this is by fiscal year along the x-axis. So this request would result in approximately 40% of programs funds being devoted to building electrification of, again, the funds that are already approved by the board during the budgeting process. Next slide, please. And one final note, as I mentioned briefly before, this item did go to the executive committee at their September 25th meeting, where it had unanimous support. There was a lot of great feedback from both board members as well as community members during that meeting and conversations afterwards. So those changes are shown in red line in the plan that's attached to the board packet. And this is a summary of the staff proposal again. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to hearing your comments and taking any questions you may have.
All right. Perfect. Thank you, Amy. Are there any questions to start us off here? Nisa?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for that presentation, Amy. I have one question and 2 comments. I'll start with a question, Amy. This sounds great. I'm curious, and I'm sure you've updated it since COVID, but I'm curious how we plan to implement a lot of these strategies and plans in this new COVID reality. I mean, there's a lot in there, and I imagine it may be challenging to do it all remotely. So I was very interested in hearing how we plan to implement it and how we would use our budget to carry out those strategies and plans. And the 2 comments I have, one has to do, and I can't remember the number or the page where the slide was, but it showed a 2-story home. And I remember for the eHub presentation, it also had a 2-story home. And I just wanted to make the comment that I hope we're using a variety of homes in our marketing and messaging, you know, multi-story, 1-story homes. And so that we're not always only showing 2-story homes. And I think that would also help with some of the barriers you identified. So that's my first comment. My second comment is really to thank you for the public policy pillar. As Garesh said at the beginning, Los Altos recently adopted its REACH codes, yay. But as we were going through that process, we got a lot of objections and opposition and resistance to implementing the REACH codes, and we realized it's really something that we have to stick with. And so the fact that SVCE will continue to support the local jurisdictions in carrying out these REACH codes, I think is very important. These are ordinance codes that another majority of council could change it. And so we really want to make sure the first step is adopting the REACH codes, but the right support is there for staff, for city staff, but also the community, so that they aren't only doing it because we're mandating it, but they obviously believe and want to do it because it's better for the community. So those are my 2 comments. And just back to my question, Amy, just if you could go into more detail about the implementation plan in this new uncertain COVID reality.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. It's in the comments and very important. I would say that regarding implementation, given the reality that we're in, we've learned a lot, I think, over the past several months, even in the development of this plan. And so the stakeholder engagement initiated very shortly after stakeholder in place, and we were wondering whether we'd be able to actually carry out effective stakeholder engagement virtually. I think many of us are really familiar with and like the in-person workshop format. But I think the stakeholders that participated in this process, really rallied and rose to the occasion. And so I would say any stakeholder engagement that would be carried out through this plan could similarly be carried out virtually. And regarding actually kind of implementation of decarbonization measures, we did see for sure for our heat pump water heater program, for instance, a pause in installations, especially once shelter in place initially took place, given many permitting offices were figuring out how to adapt and go virtual. But it did rebound. And now is a time that actually many homeowners and property owners of commercial properties seem to be looking at this as potentially an opportunity to make investments in their buildings and consider decarbonization opportunities. And we're seeing that on the resilience side as well. And so the interest certainly, the interest in taking action certainly appears to certainly still be there. If not, maybe it's greater in some respects with certain segments. But I would say just generally speaking, we try to be very flexible due to changing conditions. And if we are having difficulties with implementation, given any factor, we will pivot. And if needed, we'll come back to the board with updates or potential changes.
Right. Thank you, Nisa, for the question, and Amy for the response. Just, Amy, it was mentioned, but some of our cities are pretty much one-story cities. And in my own city, we have whole neighborhoods where there's zoning restrictions where you can't even build 2 stories. And so I think it's a make the marketing look like the communities that we're serving. And please do not underestimate Los Altos. You guys have taken it sort of publicly, but I have a lot of the same citizens in my city that are anti our mission and anti our message, and they use every opportunity to attack us. But anyway, let me go to Rod and then to Javed.
Yeah, I just wanted to recognize Liz Gibbons, who, Liz Gibbons, who is an architect, right, contributed to this in our prior meetings and discussions. So thank you, Liz, for adding your expertise here. And, if we're going to do our job, these programs are so important. I have said so before, and I guess I'll say it for the last time, but Amy, you and your team, along with other senior staff, are really hitting a home run and showing us the way forward. I will mention briefly on the general topic of programs that the Air District is taking renewed interest, continuing interest in building decarbonization as well. And we have a very interesting meeting of our Climate Protection Committee queued up for 9:30 next Thursday. We're going to be talking about what regulatory authority we have to try to move building decarbonization forward, as well as how we see programs unfolding, what authority we might seek for the state level. I'm thrilled that Rob Rennie, as well as Rich Constantine from Morgan Hill, will be joining the Air District Board. And I hope that as you're pursuing these programs here, that they help continue to foster these important relationships between the Air District and the work on the part of both staff, see who can have the most, create the most bang for the buck. Just one other comment. I just love the Sankey diagram. It really helps put things in perspective. Hats off to this work, and thanks for everybody, including board members that have contributed to this. It's gonna be fantastic and change our world.
Okay, thanks, Rod. Questions and a little bit more. Javed and then Tony.
Yeah, thank you. I guess Howard's theme of we're going to change the world is going to permeate through post Howard era, I think, and I hope it does. And it will take a team. I think it is a team effort. As a team, we all worked on getting the Beach Code 1.0 passed, and I think on this one we'll have to do that too. I noticed in our city, people were more bothered about having electrical stovetops. I mean, they wanted their gas range because they could cook their meals. So you might find it easier to sell the gas heaters and the water heaters initially to be incorporated into buildings, because I mean that ought to be done. And there may be more federal funding once Michigan decides its votes, I guess, that may be available for clean energy that I'm sure you guys are looking at. The other comment I had is whether you guys have also looked at transportation, because that is also a source of a bunch of these greenhouse gases. And what comes to my mind is a plan where that really bothers me. I guess these street lights where you stop forever and there's no traffic going the other way and everybody's burning gas while they're waiting for the light to turn green. I don't know if the VTA can put together a project where we fund the cities or whoever is in charge of those lights and help them put up smart lights all over the county. I think maybe a study should be done as to how much emission that would save if it's meaningful. I mean, if it's just, am I getting bored because I'm waiting 20 minutes, then I guess it doesn't matter. But if it's a tons and tons of gas emissions that are being emitted because people are just standing on lights that are not switching fast enough, that may be a good study. I don't know if it's already been done or not, but I would recommend such a study and see if VTA can have some input. I'm sorry, SVC, we can have some input. The VTA should be championing that, but they've got too many things on their pot right now, like getting BART to downtown. So we may need to move on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Javed. So I was going to do Tony, but Tony's hand is down. So Tony, you want to speak again? Come on back. Liz and then Rob.
I was just going to follow up on Rod Singh's comment. Thank you. I think this project and the result that staff and Amy and her team have put together reflects really the culture and purpose of our organization, which is to work together and really understand what it is that we're trying to achieve. And I'd like to thank staff, Amy and her staff, for really working thoughtfully with the council, with the board to figure out what it is that we needed to communicate with our staff and with our customers. And so I think we've got a great document here, and I'm very pleased to be part of pulling this all together. So thank you to staff.
Rob?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just want to comment that I think that staff has really done some good creative thinking, particularly on the existing building part. I mean, continuing the REACH codes is great, and moving us to the next point for new construction is easy. I think, how do you convert existing buildings, anytime in the near future? I have to talk over my dog. And I think that they're kind of thoughtfully thought through this. I can see a lot of thought in here of how do you grease it and move it forward. This feasibility assessment of how to phase out gas. I think that's an idea I wouldn't have immediately thought of, right? But it's a good part of the plan. And I also particularly like the accessible financing one they have, EB4, because another really difficult one is how do you address low income areas, right? the more wealthy areas are going to do remodeling, and you can get people on board with remodeling, and we can require remodeling. But this idea of how do we get accessible financing to the low income areas, I think is going to be key to moving this forward. So I just want to really compliment staff for kind of thinking through creatively for some programs that aren't typical programs, but are good things to really grease moving this forward.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, Tony, just double check.
Thanks, Chair. Were we wanting comments now or just questions? I only have comments.
We were going to start with questions and I was going to do comments second, but Nisa kind of jumped us into something different. So go ahead and make your comments now if you'd like, and then I'll do the public.
Okay, I was just trying to follow your rules, so that's why I lowered my hand. I can't thank Amy and the consulting team enough, because this is just a tremendous piece of work. And I think that just the board members need to realize that the work is now shifting, because consistent with what was mentioned earlier from Director Ellenberg and Director Gibbons about being able to justify what you're doing and maintaining your status as elected officials, the hard work is really starting. And I guess if we look back to March and the onset of COVID and how rapidly we all adapted to remote meetings to a large extent, and it took us a little longer to adapt to mask wearing almost universally. But this is almost going to be the same thing going on, where we have a bunch of repeat days, like we had the smoky days that we had this year all over the state, and reports that come afterward about actually people dying because of the smoke, which is directly related to climate change. And we're going to be looking at needing to rapidly change our world. And our job locally will be the built environment. The state's looking like they're going to take care of the transportation sector. So it's just a time to buckle our seatbelts and look at this plan as guidance as we move forward, because this is the important work is still to come. With that, saying that this is a great foundation for us to move forward.
Perfect questions, Tony. Let me go to the public. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this item? If you wish to do so, please indicate that by raising your virtual hand. If you're on the phone, that can be done by *9. Staff, we have some public speakers. We start with
Yes.
James.
Hi, this is James Talea. I just wanted to express my very strong support for the staff recommendation for this Building Decarb Joint Action Plan. And to express great thanks to Amy and the rest of the staff and team for a very extensive outreach effort and stakeholder engagement effort, all types of different kinds of stakeholders, and including the community organizations and advocates and residents. And the team was very responsive, and I think the end result of all that input and all that hard work has paid off, as some of the directors have already mentioned, that this plan is really strong. It's not just your typical old style utility program plan. It is really a plan for market transformation, and all, as Director Rennie and others mentioned, that it's really laying a good foundation. It's not just your standard set of programs. It lays a foundation for long-term success and what really needs to happen. And it's not just what SVCE needs to do or can do to leverage its strengths, but also what's really important is the engagement and active involvement of all the member agencies, because it's going to be critical. That's the joint of this joint action plan. All the member agencies, and I implore all the directors and assistant director or alternate directors, I should say, to go back to the rest of the, your teams in your cities, the other electeds, and really engage them on having all member agencies really active in helping making this successful. And I think it will show, and it's already showing leadership across not only the region, but the state, in showing what kind of plan needs to be put in place to make things happen to solve our great challenge. So thank you very much, and I strongly support this. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Any other member of the public wish to comment? Seeing none, I will come back to the board. Are there any board members who have not yet commented or have questions that weren't yet asked? Then is there any member of the board who'd like to make a motion? Because this is an action item, I believe. Yes.
So moved.
Second.
There will be a motion to adopt the resolution.
It is, yes. Thanks, Greg.
So that was Susan, and then Liz was the second. All right. Let me just, on behalf of the board, thank the staff for always a very thorough and great job. And I always talk about changing the world, and I know buying power is complicated, but this is the stuff that's moving the needle on the future. So we are really proud of what's going on. And Amy made the presentation, but Amy and all your staff and all those in the organization that helped on this, thank you. And with that, we go to the clerk for a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Chair Miller,
Aye.
Vice Chair Smith,
Yes.
Gibbons,
Aye.
Sinks,
Yes.
Fliger,
Yes.
Tyson,
Yes.
Rennie,
Yes.
Montano,
Yes.
Elahi,
Yes.
Yulo,
Yes.
Ellenberg.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries with Director Tovar and Abekoga absent.
All right, thank you to my fellow board members. And again, thank you to staff for driving this effort forward. All right, next up is item number 4, resolution amending our positions chart and job classifications. I think Garish.
Mr. Chair, may I interrupt for a moment?
Oh, sorry, Tony.
I just want to announce I'm going to recuse myself on this item for an abundance of caution.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Tony
Chair
is
Miller.
dark. We'll wake him up when we're ready.
Yeah,
Correct.
I'll ping him. I'll send him a text when we're ready.
Perfect.
We're going to have Melissa Charles make the presentation and request.
Hello again. Next slide. So this position, by way of background, was mentioned at the September board meeting by Garish and supported by the board. However, it was not included in this year's budget. So in terms of this position, it was identified in the strategic plan focus area, specifically related to community engagement and outreach. And there were several goals that basically relate to this position, including engaging a full range of public, private, and nonprofit stakeholders to leverage our decarbonization efforts, engaging regulators, legislators, and local electeds in developing policy to support CCAs, and influencing policymakers by building and leveraging local electeds, diverse stakeholders, and regional agencies. So just in a nutshell, basically what this position is, it's about coalition building, relationship management to help us meet our goals and amplify our voices in influencing policy. Next slide. So the Senior Government Affairs Manager. The duties for this position are to focus on building relationships at the state and local level, engaging and collaborating elected officials on policies, developing responses on key state and local policies that impact SVCE and CCAs in general, representing SVCE at state, regional, local hearings, meetings, and other public forums, and building coalitions, building a coalition of stakeholders with similar goals to amplify our influence and our messaging. And the fiscal impact is the salary range, which is $148,865 to $204,276. Next slide. So the recommendation is, staff recommendation is that the board approves resolution 2034, amending SVCE's positions chart, job classifications, and salary schedule to add this position. In terms of next steps, if you approve this, we would advertise and recruit at the end of this year, early next year. We would shortlist in January, do interviewing January, February-ish, and hopefully, crossing fingers, be onboarding in February, March of 2021. And that's it. I wanted to see if there are any questions.
Does anybody have any questions on this? Again, as I think you noted, everything here was foreshadowed when we put together the budget in the first place. And so it's actually good to see the organization moving forward. Oh, Javed, you have a question, and then I'll check with the public.
Yeah, it's a short question. Is one of the functions also going to be to apply for any funding that may be available to clean energy CCAs?
That wasn't included in the duties.
Is that being done by somebody else right now, or?
If I may step in for that. Yeah, Javed, we have a history of applying for grants. For example, we received a grant from BACMUD for about $625,000 for heat pump water heaters, and that was led by John Supp and Don Bray. So it depends on where money is available. There may be some money available on the innovation side. I know that some of the innovation programs that Amy has run has matching funds for programs, and then, so she takes care of that. So it depends on where the money's coming from, and then we'll allocate resources to get grant funding.
All right. Thank you.
Excellent. Hang on, let me get my order right. Then we'll do Nancy and then Rod.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Are those amounts salary, or is that total compensation?
That's salary.
Thank you.
Rod?
Yeah, I have comments, so you may want to take public comment, but I would be then ready to make a comment and bring a motion.
Okay, so you hang out for 1 second. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this item? If you wish to do so, please indicate by raising your virtual hand, or if you're on the phone, by pressing *9. Seeing none. You guys know I say that phrase in my sleep now with chairing so many meetings. All right, so Rod, you wanted to take the first swing at this, please?
Yeah, I want to support this position. I think that, it's very important that we have good relations with each of the council members in our member cities. We may know a lot about this sitting on this board. We may do reports out, but I think it's important that we remain well grounded in the agencies that put this JPA together. So I think that's important. That I've talked often at this board about our existential risks. It's important that we remain strong advocates for what we're doing. It's gotten easier from one perspective, but so have our goals, right? So have the opportunities. And so I think it really is focusing on both of those things that warrant this position increase. Thank you. And I would like to move that we adopt the resolution amending the positions chart and so forth for the staff report.
Excellent. Thank you, Rod. And did somebody second that?
I did, but I think someone else did too. Susan did.
All right. Who does the, I couldn't tell. Who was first?
Susan's got it.
Susan was first. So Susan officially got the second. Is there any other thoughts or comments on this? I've made my comments. Thank you to staff. And honestly, thank you to the organization for continuing to move forward. And with that, if we could get a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Chair Miller,
Aye.
Vice Chair Smith,
Yes.
Gibbons,
Aye.
Sinks,
Aye.
Fliger,
Yes.
Tyson,
Yes.
Rennie,
Aye.
Montano,
Aye.
Elahi,
Aye.
Ellenberg.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries with an abstention from Yulo and Directors Tovar and Abekoga absent.
Okay, great. So we will pause for a second so that we can reach back out to Tony to see if we can get him back online. So hang on just 1 minute, guys. And Tony is back just like that. Our next item is the super JPA that we've talked about for long-term storage. And this is Girish plus Greg.
Yes. Let me make sure I'm not, I'm not. Thank you very much, Chair Miller. Next slide, please. So I want to talk to you about the Super JPA, which is called CC Power, California Community Power. And we have 9 CCAs who are participating in this effort, as you can see here. Next slide, please. So just want to take a minute or two to get to this slide, because this is basically the fundamental need for CC power. Now, SVCE can do a lot of things, as you've noted in this meeting and previous meetings, whether it's on the program side or power supply side or legislative and regulatory side. But this business, the energy business, is very big in California, and in certain cases, there may be opportunities that present itself to us where we need to collaborate at a much bigger scale than just SVCE and the 13 agencies that make up SVCE. So that basically brings us to a larger organization like a JPA. It's essentially a JPA of JPAs, and that's why we called it Super JPA. And the name today is CC Power, to get value like economies of scale, increased negotiating power, right down to the bottom bullet here, of legislators and regulators favoring large-scale procurement, so that times where these opportunities will present ourselves. So it's going to enhance our ability to enter into various projects and initiatives that could take advantage of larger scale and larger size. So that's the business need for CC Power. And in today's discussion, both Greg and I are going to talk about this. I'll talk a little bit on what's brought us here, and then Greg's going to talk about the details of the actual JPA agreement. As of today, the 9 CCAs and all our attorneys and CEOs have worked on this agreement and have had multiple revisions of the agreement. And as of today, we finalized it, and it is going to be shared with all the cities. I'll be bringing this back to you for approval at your December 9th meeting. So today's meeting is to have a discussion, a further discussion with you on what's in that agreement. Next slide. So previous discussions we've had with you in 2018, we talked about this a little bit, but then we stopped because the business need, there's a combination of the business need, but even more important, PG&E's bankruptcy got us to a place where there were other priorities that we started to focus on. Earlier in the latter part of 2019 and the beginning of 2020, we had bills introduced that had to deal with long duration storage. We also had issues such as central procurement. So these are things where, in terms of our ability to respond, it made sense to create a larger organization. And so we started discussing this with various CCAs, and the 9 of us decided to move forward with creating CC Power. At SVCE, we have had 4 meetings so far, or I should say 4 opportunities where we've talked about this, as you can see from this slide. Next. So at a high level, CC Power, the actual agreement that we'll be bringing to you on December 9th, is an enabling agreement. It allows for each of the members of CC Power to
enter into a joint agreement for services or contracts for power. But there is no obligation if you are a member to actually enter into any of those projects. Those are basically a la carte. And Greg's going to get into the details of how decisions get made and how risk is allocated in the JPA and in the project agreements, which will be brought to you only next year. All we're going to be talking to you about today and in December is the JPA, the enabling agreement. Next slide, please. So this and the next 2 slides, I'm going to hand it over to Greg.
Thank you, Girish. So obviously the most important question you have is what are the liability exposures for joining CC Power? And the real advantage of working within the structure of a JPA agreement is under state law and the agreement itself, there is a liability firewall between the JPA and its members. So that works just like it does here for us at SVCE and its members. The same would be true for the Super JPA in that our agency will not have any responsibility for any debts, liabilities, or obligations entered into by CC Power. Now, there will be obligations with respect to the general administrative costs of CC Power, which are anticipated to be very small. This is not going to be an agency with large staff by any means. And so the basis of cost sharing for just the general administrative costs under the JPA agreement is that each party will bear those costs on an equal basis, regardless of size. And that formula will only be changed if it is changed by a 2/3 vote of the entire board. So as Girish pointed out, where do potential responsibilities or liabilities obligations arise? And that is in the context of the actual project agreements. And there is where the individual members may be assuming and will be assuming costs, responsibilities, and potential liabilities from the projects. However, first of all, the projects themselves must be approved by majority vote of the board of those in attendance. But then there are project agreements, and this is the voluntary side of the program here, in that the individual members will not be obligated to participate in any program or any project agreement unless they voluntarily agree to do so. And that can't happen until this board actually would approve of the participation by SVCE in each and every one of the project agreements that our agency may be interested in. So the next slide, we'll be talking about the membership and how CC Power is managed and how votes are made. First of all, the membership of CC Power will be made up of CCAs and also any other public agencies that are determined to be eligible under a board adopted policy, and that is the board of CC Power. The CC Power will be governed by a board of directors, as is always the case with a JPA. And in this case, each member will have one director on the board. And the directors on the board are designated in the JPA agreement to be either the CEO or the general manager of the member, or a designee that they actually appoint to serve in that capacity, including an alternate. The decisions of the CC Power are made by a majority vote of the board in attendance or a majority of the quorum, unless the agreement itself requires a 2/3 vote. And there are several instances where a 2/3 vote of the entire board is required. And that includes an amendment to the JPA agreement, the involuntary termination of a member who may be in breach of obligations under the agreement, and also the termination of the JPA agreement itself. Now, some of the amendments, and this is different, by the way, than our own JPA agreement, because this board can approve all amendments to the JPA agreement by 2/3 vote. For this particular JPA, there are certain amendments that will have to come back to our board to be approved. And that will be any change in the purpose and powers of CC Power, any change in the membership rules and requirements, any change in the limitations on liability, or any termination of the JPA of CC Power itself. And lastly, we'll talk about how do we get out of it if it turns out that the board doesn't want to stay in CC Power? Well, it's pretty easy, and this was done purposely to make withdrawal pretty straightforward. That is with respect to withdrawing from the JPA itself. And no prior notice is required. Simply this board would have to adopt by resolution a notice of intention to withdraw. That would be submitted to CC Power. And then the one thing that would have to be reviewed is whether or not SVCE had any debts, liabilities, or obligations to CC Power itself. That's going to be very unlikely. It never happened unless your board and this board decided to take on that obligation. So if there are no obligations to the board itself, other than the payment of the annual operating costs, then the CC Power board is required, it's mandatory for it to approve the withdrawal of the member. So again, this is an organization that would not be difficult to withdraw from if there was a desire by the board to do so in the future. However, one important thing to point out is that by pulling out of the JPA, you're not pulling out of any project agreement, because obviously there you will have made a commitment of obligations and money to that activity. And so the project agreement will govern how a member of a project agreement may withdraw. And so that again will be reviewed by this board before any project agreement is entered into. So you could be, feel comfortable that how that will work, and that it would work fairly if in fact there was a desire somewhere down the road to pull out of a project agreement. Girish, that covers my overview of the project agreement.
Thank you. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the first project that we are contemplating using CC Power for is the long duration energy storage project. So we have initiated our work on that by issuing an RFO, and SVCE is taking the lead on this, and Monica Padilla and her staff are running the RFO. And the reason why this is our first project is the need has been established by both California's climate goals. We know that we need long duration storage to really rapidly decarbonize the electricity grid. I think the blackouts from August also lead us to that kind of conclusion, right? We need to have reliable power, and long duration storage is one way of getting reliable power and also integrating renewable resources more effectively. The CPUC in their IRP requirements have laid out the need for long duration energy storage. It is still something that is being defined. And so when we issued our RFO and we talked to the CPUC and the legislature and the California Independent System Operator about this project and the formation of a super JPA, the feedback we got was very proactive. And if I could summarize the feedback, it was we were being proactive. We were doing this in a way that was de-risking technology and financial risk. And they were looking forward to monitoring our progress on it. We will be inviting the CPUC staff to our December 9th meeting, when you are going to be considering this for approval. They indicated an interest to be at those meetings. So we will be inviting them. Even though it's a public meeting, we'll be informing them about it. So we issued this RFO, and the next slide shows you just a snippet of some of the press we got a few weeks ago. Right on top, and by the way, each one of these these press updates, these go out to people all over the country. GTM is Green Tech Media, and it's read by utilities across the country. So over here, I thought all of you would be interested not just in the headline, but the subheading here, which I think really is a testament to all 8 CCAs being proactive about moving ahead and basically embracing the mandate that we have. So next slide. Here's the timeline we have. So we started in June to actually create this agreement, the enabling agreement. And Greg and a team of multiple lawyers representing all 9 cities have been in about 4 or 5 meetings, redlining and working on this. And we basically, as of today, we finalized the agreement. Back in October, we also issued the long duration energy storage RFO. So that's in blue. And what's coming up is in green. So in December through February, this enabling agreement for CC Power will be distributed to all 9 agencies that are interested in joining. And they'll go through that approval process. At the same time, we will be getting the results of the long duration energy storage RFO, which will be coming in on December 1st. And we'll be going through that process of evaluating and shortlisting. And the last box on the right is will take us about 6 months to negotiate 1 or more transactions, and that'll be done under CC Power. And a CC Power project agreement will be brought back to the SVCE board in the 3rd quarter of 2021. So that's the timeline for the CC Power enabling agreement, which we hope to get to you, which we will provide to you in December, and the first project agreement, which will come to you about 9-10 months later in 2021. So my next and last slide is we've completed the 4 kind of updates to you, and those are in blue, both in terms of CEO report updates, board meeting, executive committee meeting. So we've incorporated this feedback. And today we are in front of you to get feedback from you, comments. And then if we need to discuss this with the Finance Committee, we do have a November 30th Finance Committee meeting scheduled already. But if that's not needed, we will bring it to you for approval at the December 11th board meeting. So that is my presentation, and both Greg and I are obviously available for questions now.
All right, Susan, your hand went up early.
Otherwise, I could forget I had a question. Thank you. I appreciate the flexibility and a lot of the ad hoc nature of this. I imagine that that's a piece that will make it much more palatable. The structure to me seems to be set up on a very equal basis. 1 director per member, equal buy-in. I'm wondering if the 9 entities are of similar size.
No, we're not. I'd say most of us are kind of mid-size, but we do have, for example, Redwood Coast Energy Authority that is quite a bit smaller. And so administration costs are going to be split by 1 member, 1 share. And because we have small members, there will be a real push to keep those admin costs very low, because they are not going to be interested in being part of an organization.
Right, but there hadn't been conversation about doing this proportionally, whether with regard to votes or buy-in?
Yes, so there are 2 levels of voting, Susan. One is the project voting. So when you actually enter into a project, that project voting will be purely based on, it'll be proportional to your size. Yeah. And so even the cost allocation would be anything related to the project would be allocated based on proportion.
Great, thank you. That makes sense. I just wanted to clarify the differences. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, so then Rob and then Nisa.
Thank you, Chair. So Girish, I want to ask the same question I asked in private, just because I think it's important for board members to think about it. We know that the neck of the duck is the intensive carbon time of the day, and by buying all of this storage, it allows us to, instead of having to fire up gas plants at that time, the storage can be used. And you showed that this JPA with its 9 members is planning to buy 500 megawatts. So the question I asked is, how much of our load's contribution to this problem during the neck of the duck does that storage address?
Okay. So this long duration storage is both for the neck of the duct, but it's even beyond that, right? So when you really think about long duration storage, the definition right now is more than 8 hours. But when you think about what's being discussed around the world, essentially, it's looking at multiple day storage. And the technology for that will get developed. But there's hydrogen storage, for example, that can be used for multiple days. And we're going to need different kinds of storage for different needs. So if you're talking just about the duct, long duration storage will help, but more 4-hour storage would also help. When you're talking about the ability to arbitrage prices, 1 hour and just take care of some peaks, 1 hour storage in some cases would be useful. So just like power plants come in various flavors, right? So you have peaking power plants, you have intermediate power plants, and you have baseload power plants, each serving a different need. Energy storage also serves different needs, and long duration storage serves a certain need. So let me then come to the other part of your question about the quantities. The CPUC in the IRP had two, what should I say, model portfolios, depending on how much emission reduction we wanted to achieve by the year 2030. The more aggressive 2030 emission reduction goal resulted in about a 1,600 megawatt need for storage. And so what we did is we took a pro rata share, the 8 of us who are participating. Look, what is the pro rata share of what the PUC put out in their IRP documents as to what we would need? The other thing the PUC also put out is we need to start long duration storage coming online in the year 2026. So the 500 megawatts is a pro rata share of what's in the IRP that represents what we have. The 1,600 megawatts, and so SVCE's share of that 500 is going to be about 50 megawatts. Just to put this in context also, with all the work that Monica and her team has done in bringing in solar storage, so far we've signed about 135 megawatts of storage. Her next round of storage is going to be another, I think, approximately the same amount. So when we're talking about this 4-hour storage will be more than 200 megawatts. Long duration storage right now, we are targeting about 50 megawatts or so. Hope that answers your question, Rob.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far into the detail. I just thought it would be interesting for people to start thinking about it a little bit. Thank you.
Okay. And keep thinking about it. Nisa and then Tony.
Thanks, Chair. Girish, you may have answered my first question about who is going to staff the Super JPA, because you just mentioned an admin role. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So our current plan is we'll hire an interim general manager and an interim general counsel. They will not be full-time, but basically we need to have a general counsel to stand up the organization, very similar to the kind of approach that we use at SVCE, where Greg Stepanisic is not a full-time employee, but we utilize him for our JPA agreement, for standing up the JPA. Additionally, the other costs we think we will be incurring in the first year has to do with the project. So we're going to hire a lead negotiator and a transaction lawyer, very similar to what we do right now, where Monica is essentially our lead negotiator, and we have Steve Hall of Hall Energy being our transaction counsel. So we will be hiring a lead negotiator and transaction counsel for all 8 of us. The costs associated for that will be divided up proportionally just for the project participants. Now, we'll be discussing this transaction at JPA meetings, at which point you'll have to set up, there'll be some of those costs will be allocated to the JPA as general costs. We are actually working out the budget right now.
but I figured that it's going to be a very small fraction of the total cost of this project that will get allocated to the JPA itself.
Thanks, Girish. And I think my other questions are for Greg. So Greg, my first question has to do with the fact that we each represent our own jurisdictions on this normal JPA, and now we have a super JPA. Do each of us need to go back to our own age? I just want to confirm we don't have to. As members of this JPA, we have authority to approve the super JPA. We don't each have to go back to our individual agencies to get approval.
That is correct.
Okay. And I saw on the slide that the CEO or manager will be the representative on the super JPA for each JPA. So does that mean Girish or his designee would have to, what would be his authority for every decision he would make on our behalf? Would we just delegate that to him, or would he have to come back to us as our representative to represent us on the super JPA? How would that work?
Well, with respect to the actual just administrative operations of the JPA, those would be all again obligations only of the super JPA and not of SVCE. So so there will have to be, obviously, the super JPA like you have will have to have some policies as to what it may do on administrative matters. But where there's any decision that would impact on a cost basis or obligation basis, SVCE, Girish is going to have to come back to the board. So that's why, again, even though the Super JPA board will approve the projects, for SVCE to participate within a project, it has to come back to the board. So again, there'll be no authority for Girish to actually incur liabilities on behalf of SVCE unless the board has approved it.
And does the CPUC have to approve the super JPA? You have all these CCAs now merging. And it just occurred to me, I wonder if this somehow raises a yellow flag for the CPUC. Do they have to approve this kind of, I don't want to say merger, but this grouping of the different CCAs?
No, there'd be no approval authority of the CPUC here because the Super JPA itself will not be conducting a CCA program that requires an implementation plan that's approved by the CPUC. So it's conducting programs to the benefit of the members, but it's not actually conducting a CCA program. So there's no CPUC involvement in approving or monitoring the Super JPA.
And if not CPUC, maybe another agency, but happy to hear that. And then the last question has to do with the terms of the agreement. And it sounds like you do have, all the lines drawn as you should. But what about joint and several liability? So let's say we enter into an agreement, even for the LDES that we're talking about right now, and one party, one of our CCAs, decides for whatever reason they want to withdraw from that program or agreement. And that obviously not only impacts that individual CCA, it will impact the entire program. And so, what are the terms in the agreement to protect us that if one CCA defaults or whatever action that is, that we're not on the hook? Because the impact on the other entity is not solely limited to that withdrawing CCA, as you know, it's a bigger impact depending on how it's structured. So how are we protecting ourselves there?
Yeah, that's really an excellent question. And the place where this, again, is going to arise is with the project agreements. And, those have not been worked up yet. But those project agreements are going to have to address, what the responsibilities and how costs will be then allocated over to the other members if someone withdraws. The basic concept that we have in our own JPA agreement is with the power purchase agreements that have been entered into that are to benefit each of the members of SVCE. If one of our members wanted to withdraw, they're going to have to they're not going to be able to avoid any financial impact to the JPA by withdrawing through losses suffered through excess energy being purchased, for example. So, that was a big issue when we were forming SVCE, was to address that issue so the remaining members would not be harmed by one member withdrawing financially. So that's the same issue that's going to be occurring here with the project agreements. And that is something we'll have to review with the board when those project agreements come to you to make sure there's a good understanding as to what the cost implications will be to the remaining members of a project agreement if one or more members withdraws.
Thanks, Greg, and great presentation. And I'll save my comments for later, Chair.
Okay, Tony and then Rod.
Thanks, Howard. Great questions, Nisa. It sounds like that last one you just need to remember for when the project agreement comes back. Girish, I had a simple kind of question. There's 9 entities, all Northern California or Central California based. I'm kind of asking, were these 9 selected to keep it a reasonable number? Like, who wasn't invited to the group, or was everyone invited and these were the 9 that decided to play?
The latter.
Okay. And so I assume we would be open to others joining at a future date.
Yes.
And do you have a sense as to why people didn't join?
Yes. And we can always have a sidebar conversation on that. But some are very large, and they basically have immense scale, and they can do this on their own. Others have other issues and priorities where they have just started their CCA, and they're really focused on the startup of their operations. So those were the 2 basic ones I've heard. But overall, very positive in terms of creating CC power. And so, for example, one entity said, I want to be part of it, but maybe not the long duration energy storage at this point, but I'm really interested in what we can do. And they had several ideas about what CC power could do on a regional and statewide basis. And we said, well, let's wait on that. Let's get the first project off the road.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Rod?
Thank you very much. So just so we're clear, what this Super JPA does is sets up a framework for us to then go and do projects together under a common set of rules and understandings, correct?
Yes.
This is nothing more than that at this point. As Nesa, I think you're a lawyer, aren't you? As she correctly pointed out, right? Or as we learned through her questions, it's in each of the projects that we choose to do together with certain other parties, but maybe, in a given project, there's only 3 or 4 interested.
Exactly.
It's those agreements where we have to be clear about who's on the hook if one of the parties has an issue, can't fulfill their obligations under that contract, correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay, so I think, yeah, so I think that answers my questions, and I'll have comments about this when we get to that section.
If I may just add to that, both Monica and I, and then Tom Habashi, who you know, and Jan Pepper also, we all have experience with Northern California Power Agency, which has been around for close to 50 years and is, basically 16 members, 16 cities in Northern California are part of that. And they have a lot of these project agreements. So they own a hydroelectric plant, which has one subset of members being owners. They own a geothermal plant, which has a different subset. They have a combustion turbine. And so these project agreements, lots of precedent to both allocating the benefits and obligations, but there's also another agreement that we'll have to develop is how do these plants get operated for our joint and individual benefit. So that's also the reason why we need some of the staff, the lawyers, to be able to create those agreements.
Good? Yep, okay, good. Any other questions? Let me double check with the public. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this item? If you wish to do so, please indicate by raising your virtual hand, or if you're on the phone, you can do that by pressing *9. All right, seeing none, it kind of comes back to us as a group. This was an informational item. And again, we've been getting pieces of this throughout the last year. I think Rob Rennie called it pretty close, which is, you know, we need to wrestle with the neck of the duck curve. And that's going to require long-term storage. And Girish lays out the case very compellingly that these are going to be larger purchase agreements as larger projects of which we're going to want a part. And so this is the best and most efficient way to do it. So are there any other final thoughts from anybody?
I'll just offer a comment. So if you go back and take a look at this GTM Green Tech article, it says the first major long duration storage procurement has arrived. The subheading is California's community choice aggregators are moving ahead of the traditional utilities. And it further says this is the biggest one ever to date. And oh, by the way, Girish is quoted in this. This is a publication that's read nationwide. And if we know one thing about climate change, there are going to be leaders and followers. And if we're going to be successful, there have to be leaders. In this case, we're doing it. But we also need people who will follow our model. And I think, you know, what we can, the opportunity, while there's some risk here, I think the opportunity for us to be seen as the innovators within our own state and elsewhere is really important. So I'm very excited. Well, maybe a little nervous because we're incurring some more risk in these. I don't think by forming the JPA, but in the deals we do, we could be incurring some further risk. I just think the opportunities we will find over time to shake up the business will far exceed the risks we incur. So I think this is a great initiative, and you know, something that we had talked about doing perhaps under the umbrella of Cal CCA 2 or 3 years ago, and we weren't ready. And then the decision was made that this is a better organizational form to make those happen. So I'm excited to see how this progresses. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. Any other comments? Then I think we'll close out on this item and wish Girish and Greg all the luck in moving forward. And that brings us up to board member announcements or direction on future agenda items. And I had previously cheated the system by talking about how we'll deal with the January meeting. So that's in the hopper someplace. Is there any other thoughts, Susan or Rod?
Yes, I want to say that I really appreciated having a meeting at 3 in the afternoon rather than 7 at night. And I don't know if this is part of the bylaws or just habit, but if this board is interested in moving to a daytime meeting, I'm certain the staff would support that. I would be very glad to champion that effort in whatever way it needs to move forward.
Except for it was a Friday, Susan.
You know, some baby steps, Howard. Friday's hard, but I found this meeting to be exponentially more fascinating. And I'm pretty sure it's because I am much more awake.
It is a good meeting, and that we did have a few that went past midnight on Wednesday night in the past.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that we're not.
Has this board ever met during the day, and is that an option?
This is the first board meeting I can remember during the day. It seems like all of our committee meetings, however, are during the day. And as
would you be open to doing maybe a Zoom poll or something to see if there's enough interest in moving to the daytime?
There are a few of us who obviously will not be back next year. I think you should raise that exact question in February when you get people that are going to officially be on the board.
This is true, but I don't know if they need to, if the staff needs to do scheduling beforehand, but I'm happy to take that offline with Girish unless anybody wants to wave their arms and say, absolutely no, don't do that.
Well, I mean, our executive board and our committees meet during the day, so it wouldn't be unthinkable to move the board as well, but I don't really have a vote in this. I would notice happy hour, it's a great time.
There's going to be a process, right? And I think that staff would have to let us know what was possible or what changes would be necessary.
Right.
And
Right.
I think
Thank you.
Then
Right, and I would just offer, if I may, that some past, current, and future board members do have regular jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the reasons that meetings happen in the evenings here. So just as I don't have any objection myself, but others may find it difficult to.
Sure, and I certainly appreciate that, and I don't know how much flexibility folks have with their work schedules to be able to carve out a few hours once a month. But I'm happy to go through whatever process is.
Can we leave it
deemed
like
to be
this?
appropriate?
That Susan will talk with Girish to find out if there's any structural issues, and that you guys will queue this up for discussion in February when you have your new board.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I would support Susan on her efforts. I think we might be able to give people an excuse chit so they can take time off from work.
That wasn't my ulterior motive, but it's just so much easier.
Not too much of a discussion. I think we leave it in the hands of the clerk to be scheduled, and we're good with that. Lisa?
So first, let me say, Chair, coming into this meeting, I was a little bit more dressed down, but knowing that this was your meeting and you always dress up for the meeting, I actually put on a suit. And so when I came on, I was very disappointed to see that you were dressed up because you normally are. I don't know if it has to do with the 3 p.m. start time tonight, but I'm just calling you out on this, Chair Miller. I'm serious.
It was a series of updating Zoom, another meeting that went really long, and it's cold in my basement, and I didn't have time to run up and change. So,
But I'm teasing. My real question has to do with the December 4th social that's on my calendar. Is that something board members attend? This is my first full year on SVCE. And so I wasn't sure, and we don't have a meeting before that. So is that something we normally attend? Is it just for staff? I mean, it's on our calendars.
Oh, this is for all of you to attend the social event?
Yes, on December 4th.
Yes. So part of this is we just wanted to, we don't have the back and forth that we would normally have at a regular board meeting where we could actually meet with board members. So this is kind of like a bit of a social. And yes, everyone please attend. We have a couple of our board members and a couple of our staff who are going to entertain us during that event.
Okay.
And then if I may add to it, we are going to have recognition at the December board meeting for our departing board members, not just Rod, Nancy, and Howard, but also Dave Cortese and Courtney Corrigan.
you know, one thing that happens, Nisa, again, you're new, it's all learning the stuff, is you've been around a little bit more. Staff likes to know that you're a real person. And so, you know, you'll notice that we show up a little bit early to the board meetings when they were in the evenings in Cupertino. And we would talk to the staff, or for some of the committee meetings, we would swing by some of the desks and talk to staff. We're such a small organization, and all of us knowing each other helps us be more cohesive. And the discussion with Girish was, I've missed everybody for 9 months. Can't we have a get together? So I think he added us in. But moving forward, I really, you know, I'll make this as part of my outgoing speech when I leave, but board and staff, it's not this arm's length relationship in this organization. And so how each person helps bridge that is important, and it helps us be a more powerful and flexible organization. So
Can I say on behalf of the Entertainment Committee, we're looking for some self-nominations. Who's coordinating this at the staff level, in case there's anybody who wants to add to our program?
Pamela?
Pamela, okay.
Yes,
Very
please self-nominate yourself. Yeah, we are looking forward. So right now, I don't think it's a surprise, but Rod and George are going to be
Two
on
of the
docket.
many board members contributing. Yeah.
Is it Laurel and is it
Here's the
Oh
preview.
my.
Abed?
What time does it start? What's the starting time?
So, where is it?
What time?
Let me look.
3 p.m.
3.
And you heard a little preview from George right there.
Okay, are there any other board announcements or action items for future board agendas? Liz?
I just wanted to make sure we spent a moment to re-acknowledge Rob Rennie's position on the BACMed board. We're very fortunate to have one of our board members continue on in Rod Sink's role in a very important connection between the two organizations. So congratulations, and delighted that that worked out.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you for your vote too.
Congrats.
All right, any other announcements or future items? Seeing none, we're going to call this meeting adjourned. Thank you guys for a Friday afternoon meeting. Good job.